What's up everyone, Phil here for KO Gaming, and welcome to my 1 month retrospective on Street Fighter V. It was actually 1 month ago today that Street Fighter V was officially released for sale, and after playing the game really hardcore for the very first week, but then taking time away to do other stuff, but still returning to it once a week in an online capacity, I'd like to give you my follow-up thoughts on how I feel the game has progressed. When I officially reviewed Street Fighter V a few weeks ago, I had some pretty less than favorable things to say about it. At this point, now that I have returned at least once a week to see what's up with the game, to keep with it in a competitive capacity, and to also see if Capcom has done any kind of improvements, I'd like to outline everything that I've discovered in this video. First off, before we even get into any of the major things, it has to be mentioned that there is no DLC available for Street Fighter V yet. Now, we've been promised by Capcom that by the end of March, we're going to have the first DLC character, Alex, as well as the Challenges/Trials mode, a full game tutorial about the different mechanics of the game, including the new crush counters, as well as online lobbies that will support up to 8 players instead of the only measly 2 that exist right now. Now, if Capcom fulfills that promise, awesome, but with no actual promised release date and only 2 weeks left in the month, things are starting to become uncertain, but let's hope that they do live up to expectations. But now on to something that does currently exist in the game. Let's talk about the online play, which was a huge piece of controversy when the game released a month ago. I still hold by my statement that the online connectivity and netcode is a lot better than that of Street Fighter 4, with I would probably say 75 to 80% of matches being considered passable, while about 20% are just god-awful waste of time. Unlike Street Fighter 4, when there's lag, the game would slow down to a crawl or your inputs would be massively delayed, in Street Fighter 5, more often than not, you're going to see teleporting characters, massive drop frames of animation, and rollback, meaning the game shows something happen, then takes it back on the screen almost as if it hit the rewind button and then a fast forward to show you what actually happened. It's annoying, especially in a competitive capacity if you're trying to learn the game and say, well, this move has priority over this move, but then the game takes back stuff and then you end up having a difficult time trying to actually learn the game because you don't really know what to do in situations if the netcode is constantly rolling back. Ultimately, I can say the netcode is pretty solid. When a few matches, when they work, really feel like you're sitting right next to a person on your own couch playing them, but when the netcode is bad and you've got a bad connection, it's absolutely atrociously awful. One really annoying thing that I've discovered about the game is that it doesn't matter what quality of connection you actually tell it to search for, it's completely random. I've had it search for any connection, a connection of 3 to 5 bars of network connectivity goodness, 4 to 5 bars, and no matter what I do, it's a mixed bag. Some matches will be great, and some matches will be absolutely terrible. So whatever settings they've got in there don't really work, and unfortunately you just have to be at the mercy of whoever you get matched up against. Sadly, a lot of these issues with connectivity and the netcode are making Street Fighter V a much harder game to learn than its predecessors. In Street Fighter 4, when there was bad netcode, the match would run in slow motion and you'd have a lot of input delay. But you could actually learn some pretty valid strategies just by watching the online play or participating in it. In Street Fighter V, some of these matches skip so many frames of animation that it's impossible to tell what works and what doesn't. And to make matters worse, the input execution in Street Fighter V is some of the most strict of any Street Fighter game. It's a lot more difficult to time moves properly, to make sure you're hitting within a certain amount of frames or reacting within a certain amount of time. This game is a lot more execution heavy than Street Fighter 4 ever was, but unfortunately that doesn't come through in the online play because of the frequent issues with the netcode and the connectivity. So it actually makes this game a lot harder to learn on a competitive level if all you're able to do is play against opponents online. Now, thank goodness that there is a robust training mode in the game, but it does remain to be said that there's a lot of people who don't have local competition. The only way that they can actually play other humans is an online connectivity, and really it's going to be hard to learn the game at a competitive level if you're always having issues with matches, with rollback, and with skipped frames of animation. Another thing that's leading to a difficulty increase in learning the game on a competitive level is the matchmaking system. Now, it's kind of funny because absolutely up until today, the day I'm making this video, the matchmaking was incredibly inconsistent. You would just sit there and wait upwards of 10 minutes sometimes to even get a single match because the matchmaking had some kind of an issue. But as of today, I played for 4 straight hours and had instant matches all day long. So I don't know if there was some kind of a tweak or an improvement to the netcode, but I have to say 2 thumbs up for Capcom for that because it was unbearable trying to get matches in the previous setting. However, not all of the changes to matchmaking have been improvements. Right in the middle of launch weekend, Capcom announced on Twitter that they were tweaking the netcode so that you would be facing harder opponents than you had previously been just a couple of days before, when most of you were facing newcomers who had never played the game. a lot of people were complaining that it was far too easy because every match was against a brand new player who had never played, and they were just getting non-stop wins. So Capcom actually flipped that on its head and made it so that 95% of the time when you're playing online, regardless if it's a ranked or casual style match, you're going to be playing against someone who has way more league points than you and probably has been playing way more than you. Now, if you are looking to be a competitive player and you absolutely want the maximum challenge at every match, you're probably rejoicing at this change. But what about those of us who don't really care about that and just want to mess around and have some fun online against some random players who aren't necessarily playing the game hardcore? Or what if you're trying out a brand new character who you've never played with before and you just want to get some in-person experience against someone? You don't necessarily want to get bodied by someone who's been playing someone who's their main character from day one and has 5,000 more league points than you. Right now, there is absolutely no solution for either of those cases because there's no ability to select the difficulty level of player who you face when you play this game online. This was present in Street Fighter 4, so it's not impossible to do, it's just yet another glaring omission that Capcom has in this game at launch. I mean, it's ridiculous. I've only been able to play with maybe 3 characters online overall, because those were the characters who I played with launch week. Because if I tried to play with a new character online, it would just be loss after loss after loss to people who've been playing the game a hell of a lot more than me, and have been playing the same characters since launch, so they're not trying to learn something new. I think it's ridiculous. I think that it forces people to play the game offline, and for a lot of people, they don't have offline competition, so the game basically becomes completely pointless, and I don't know what the heck Capcom was thinking. And now the issue of rage quitting. That's right, it was discovered that there was absolutely no safeguard against, nor penalty for those who rage quit in Street Fighter V. They could literally play a ranked match, be about to lose, pull the plug, and never get a loss. Some of the people at the top of the leaderboards are still infamous rage quitters. Now, Capcom's solution is a complete cop-out. They want players to record matches and send them video evidence of rage quitting. That completely takes the responsibility off of their shoulders and puts it on the shoulders of the consumer. That's not acceptable for someone who paid $60 to now be expected to police the online community by yourself. The common person does not want to record every match they ever play to try to get rid of rage quitting. So it's absolutely unacceptable. Capcom claims they're going to fix it, but has still done absolutely nothing. It still remains a very large issue, and I cannot believe that in 2016 a modern fighting game was released for an issue that's existed for over a decade, and Capcom didn't have the forethought to think that this would be a problem. Now, outside of the online gameplay, let's just talk about the general combat and the engine of Street Fighter V and what I've discovered about it in the month that I've played the game. The gameplay can range from fast-moving, fun, and dynamic to absolutely god-awful lockdown, dependent on what kind of character you're using and what the matchup is. Some matchups can be free-flowing and fun, dependent on, if you have a zoning character, if you have a fast-moving character. It's actually been discovered that characters like Dalzim are incredibly hard to play with, but are high-ass tournament-level winners if you can actually get great execution. And that's pretty damned awesome. But there are some matchups and some characters in Street Fighter V that are just god-awful. I mean, let's just face it, Zangief is terrible in this game, and that's a shame because he's actually one of the most unique characters ever in the series, and he's actually one of my favorite characters who I love to play with. But they took away all of the tools that he needed to combat ranged gameplay, including his green hand called the Banishing Fist, which in Street Fighter IV allowed him to move forward through projectiles. That was the move that he used to knock down opponents, completely removed from this game. His spinning clothesline, which used to also be very good for combo ability as an anti-air, has had most of its priority and reach completely removed. They've also taken out the ability to have 2 different ones, if the one he has is very slow and just isn't very useful in many situations. I just don't understand what they were going for. It's like they've purposely removed all of the tools that Zangief used to be a good character, and instead made him this uphill climb style guy against anyone who has any kind of a ranged game. If someone has great normals, if someone has fireballs, you're going to have an incredibly tough time getting in on them with Zangief. And the tools that they did give him, his V skill and a headbutt that can absorb fireballs, don't really help him to get in, which is what he needs to do to deal damage. So what on earth was Capcom thinking? He's not the only character. There's 1 or 2 others who really are just right now are having a tough time against the rest of the cast, and I don't know what the hell happened. On the flip side, some of the top tier characters in Street Fighter V are incredibly overpowered and easy to play with to boot. I mean, it begs the question, did they do enough actual play testing before this thing was released? In general, right now, my most infamously hated character in the game is M. Bison. Here's a character who has frame advantage on nearly every single move in his repertoire. He can lock down certain characters with hit strings that you can never reverse or break out of unless you have incredibly good execution, which, again, online is not going to happen. Like, he's not hard to play with, He's got high combo ability. He's safe in everything he does. I actually started calling him Mr. Safe because 95% of the time, there's no opening to hit the guy. What the fuck were they thinking with him? Like, that's just a no-brainer that at least in a game, there needs to be risk-reward. Yes, if the character is overpowered, that's great, but make it so that he's very execution-heavy or very difficult to play with to play on that level. They did the complete opposite in Street Fighter V and made Bison one of the easiest characters ever in the franchise to play, and it gave him everything safe. It baffles the mind what they did with him. Now, keep in mind, these observations are only based on a month's worth of gameplay, and Street Fighter V is relatively early into its life cycle. I mean, Street Fighter IV lasted some 7+ years in a competitive circuit and had several rebalances during that time, which already we're kind of getting wind of. I really get the feeling that Zangief's probably going to get some tweaks, and then Bison's going to get some nerfs when they actually start patching the game, which is supposed to happen in early 2017, according to Capcom. So don't get too discouraged when you hear these things. You're like, damn, I don't want to play an unbalanced game. This has always happened in Street Fighter. In fact, Street Fighter IV Vanilla, the first version, Sagat was so incredibly overpowered in that first version, and we were stuck with that one for nearly 2 years. So, there you have it. Those are my 1 month thoughts on the game, and I hope that obviously this paints a picture for you, now that it's a month later, of whether or not this is a game that you would like to check out. I still have to stand by my original reasoning that if you're the kind of person that is not going to be playing this game in a competitive capacity, and you only like to play fighting games for fun on your own time, this probably is not the game for you right now. That may change with all the new DLCs and releases we're promised, but right now, the game is online oriented, it's very hard to learn, you're going to be playing opponents who are much better than you most of the time, and if you don't have the time to practice offline and you don't have anyone to play with, you're probably never going to learn or get any better. So, Street Fighter V in a competitive capacity, thumbs up, in a casual capacity, way thumbs down until that changes. Well, that's it for my 1 month retrospective on Street Fighter V. I hope you enjoyed it, but what did you think? Leave a comment on the video and let me know. If you want to check out any of my raw gameplay of Street Fighter V from the past month, you can head over to my YouTube channel, DsPgaming, where they've all been added to nice, neat playlists. In addition, please check the description of this video for our Amazon Associates link, and please check out my Patreon at patreon.com/DarksidePhil. Thanks a lot, everyone, and I'll see you soon for more content here on KO Gaming.